Okay, so the next guide is all about crafting within ESO. Last episode we spoke about skills and attributes, link will be in the description if you missed it. So without further ado, let's get started. In the Elder Scrolls Online, there are 7 different crafts you can take up. The choice is entirely up to you. You could choose one of the 7, or all of them. Crafting is a good way to get some better gear and items in the long run, but with ESO being an MMO, I'm sure there are players out there willing to help you if you decided to not take up any crafting, so it isn't mandatory. I'm going to start by going over blacksmithing, woodworking, and clothing. The reason why I'm going over these first 3 at the same time is because they are almost identical in every way. If you understand one, you'll understand all 3. Blacksmithing, woodworking, and clothing all have the same layout. You have refine, creation, deconstruction, improvement, and research. So let's go through what each of these mean. Refining. When you have scavenged for materials in the world, you bring a total of 10 of that material back to the table in question. Now this material will be a raw version, so for blacksmithing it will be in ore form, for clothing you'll have hide and raw fibrous plants, and for woodworking you'll have just wood. Upon refinement of 10 of that raw material, you'll receive anywhere between 7 and 10 of the refined version back. So your ore will refine into ingots, your hide will become leather scraps and your raw plants will become the non-raw version, and your wood will become sanded wood. It is with these refined materials you can then create weapons and armour. Blacksmithing ore can be found near rocky outcroppings, cliffs or mountains. Wood can be found near trees or washed up near bodies of water. For clothing, you'll find hide from animals. You'll need to hunt and kill them for it. And for the plants that produce the cloth, you'll need to look in grassy areas, open spaces with lush greenery. So, now you have your refined materials, you're ready to craft some items. So in creation, you'll be presented with this menu. It is here you can craft and create your weapons of choice and armour. Remember though, blacksmithing will allow you to create any metal weapon and heavy armour, clothing will allow you to produce light and medium armour, and woodworking will allow you to craft wooden staffs, bows, and a shield. In this menu, you first need to pick the item you want to craft. Once done, you then select the material you're working with. Don't be intimidated by the amount of materials available. They work the exact same way, the only difference is level. For example, you can use iron ingots to create items between level 1 and 14, but then any higher, you'll need to move on to steel ingots and so on and so forth. You get the new ingots the exact same way as before. No difference. Then lastly, you have style material. Every race has a unique style they create their weapons and armour in, so Breton stuff will look different to Nord and Imperial, etc, etc. As a baseline, you automatically know your own race's style. To learn more, you need to find racial motif books whilst exploring. They allow you to craft in another race's style. You will need to find the style material though. For example, Bretons use molybdenum. You can easily get this by speaking to the blacksmithing, clothing or woodworking NPC merchant. As for trait, I'll go into that in just a moment. It isn't needed to craft anything, it's an optional step. So with all the information I've just given, you should now be able to craft a piece of armour or weaponry. Moving on to deconstruction. This part is very self-explanatory. In your travels, you'll come across armours, weapons, staffs and shields dropped from enemies or even found in chests. If you don't want them, and I don't blame you, you can deconstruct them to gain some materials back. You might not get loads of stuff in return, but it's just a bit extra that helps out. The improvement menu allows you to improve the quality of an item using upgrade materials. You get these materials by refining raw materials or by deconstructing items of that quality. There are 5 qualities of an item: white, green, blue, purple and gold, each increasing the armour or damage of your piece of equipment. The last menu is research. As intimidating as this may look, I can assure you it's not. When exploring the world, you may come across a piece of armour or weaponry with a trait on it. That trait could be reinforced, sturdy, divines, precise, training, etc, etc. This is a little extra added bonus that can be applied to any weapon or armour piece. Upon using an item with a trait, you will then gain the effects of that trait. For example, if you decide to wear a heavy chest piece that has the reinforced trait on it, then that heavy chest piece will have an increase to its armour rating, because that's what reinforced does to an item it's on. If you use a weapon with the defending trait on it, your physical and spell resistance will be increased, because that's what the defending trait does. What you need to remember though, is that all weapons have the same 9 traits, and all armour have the same 9 traits. Weapon and armour traits are different. So how do you apply a trait via the creation menu? In order to make items with traits on them, you first need to find an item in the world with that trait. Then you need to go to the corresponding table and research that trait. Once the item has finished researching, you'll then be able to apply that trait to the piece of armour or weaponry it was researched off. For example, if I find a dagger with the precise trait on it, I take it to the blacksmithing table and research it. Once done, I can then craft a dagger with the precise trait on it. You do need a trait gem however. Every trait has a corresponding gem. You can find those by refining raw materials or by deconstructing items with that trait on. Now be warned, when you research an item, you in turn destroy the item. So if you have a trait on an item that you're using, don't research it, as you'll lose that item forever. As I mentioned earlier, everything I just discussed with blacksmithing is the exact same for woodworking and clothing. The only difference is the material you're working with. So if you understood everything I said on blacksmithing, you now also know how to use woodworking and clothing. Now we move on to jewellery crafting. Jewellery crafting is only available to players who own the Somerset chapter. If you don't, then you can't interact with the jewellery crafting station. Now, believe it or not, the whole process with jewellery crafting is again identical to blacksmithing, clothing and woodworking. There are a few differences, however. Difference 1 is that you're dealing with rings and necklaces only. Difference number 2 is the material you're working with. And the last difference are the 9 traits that can be researched for jewellery. Armour has its unique 9, weapons have their unique 9, and jewellery has a unique set of traits as well. The material for jewellery crafting can be found in similar places to blacksmithing ore, around rocky areas. Next is enchanting. Enchanting allows you to place powerful enchantments on your armour, weapons and jewellery. The enchantments vary. For armour, you can create enchantments that increase your health, magicka and stamina, and maybe increase your resistances. For weapons, you can craft enchantments that increase your damage, or maybe even do an extra bit of damage like flame or ice or shock. And for jewellery, it's almost like a cross between weapons and armour, crafting enchantments that increase your damage or your health, magicka and stamina recovery. You'll first need to find the appropriate materials. In the world, you will come across runestones, usually found, well, anywhere, really. Back to the enchanting table. You'll want to go to Creation. This is where you'll find all your runes that you've collected. You have 3 different types of runestones. Potency, which is essentially whether or not your enchantment is going to add something to you or take something away from the enemy. For example, I can create an enchantment that increases my magicka, or I can create an enchantment that takes away magicka from my enemy. Potency runestones also dictate level of the enchantment. Essence runestones is the main core runestone. This is basically what your enchantment will do. You'll find flame, frost, shock, physical resistance, spell resistance, disease and poison resistance, spell damage, weapon damage, the list goes on and on. Lastly, you have aspect. This is the quality, which will dictate the power of the enchantment. So, combining all 3, you could end up with something like add magicka, blue quality, add fire damage, gold quality, take away resistances, white quality. Something to remember is that some enchantments are only available for weapons, where some are only for armour, and others are only for rings and necklaces. Another note, when you find a rune for the very first time, you won't actually know what it is. You first need to use it once to learn its properties. Meaning, the first time you find the Mako rune, it won't say that Mako is magicka. After using it once, it will then state underneath that the Mako rune is magicka. Alchemy. Alchemy allows you to craft potions and poisons. Poisons can be equipped to your hotbar and used whenever, but they do have a cooldown time. Poisons can be equipped to your weapons, however once done, they will negate any enchantment you've placed on that weapon. You can only use one, an enchantment or a poison. Alchemy is broken down into 2 components, solvents and reagents. Solvents is either a form of water for potions or some vile liquid of some description for poison. Then reagents are the items you then add to make the potion or poison do whatever it is you want it to do. For potions, you can create things that restore your health, your magicka, your stamina, you can increase your recovery, or you can increase your damage for a time. For poisons, you can create some that do gradual damage over time, and others that steal the enemy's magicka and stamina. As you can see, the combinations are endless. It adds lots of variety for your character. So let's go out into the world and find those solvents and reagents. Your water can be found, well, in water, whereas your poison solvent can be found usually on Daedra. Reagents can be found anywhere, depending on what type you're after. Flowers can be found in meadows, whereas mushrooms usually prefer shaded, dank areas. Some creatures drop reagents too. So how do I know what reagent does what? Every reagent has a total of 4 properties. You won't know what any of them are to begin with. If you eat one of your reagents, you will reveal what one of those 4 properties are. To learn the other 3, you will have to trial and error them by making lots of potions at the alchemy station. If you find 2 reagents that have the same property, then it will be revealed. If nothing matches, then nothing will be revealed. Alchemy is as simple as pairing like with like. After lots of trial and error, you'll soon know all 4 properties for all the reagents, so then you can make potions and poisons to your heart's content, knowing exactly what to pair with what. The last craft to go over is provisioning. This is the craft of food and drink. Food and drinks in ESO give you buffs for a time, and those buffs are either increasing your health, magicka and stamina, or increasing your health, magicka and stamina recovery. This is a great way to gain that little extra bit of magicka you need, or stamina. Provisioning is the easiest craft to get into. You require 2 things: recipes and ingredients. Recipes can be found anywhere in the world, on people, in people's homes, in barrels and crates, in sacks, sometimes as quest rewards. Ingredients can be found in very similar places, just not as quest rewards. Once you have read your recipe, you can then come to your provisioning fireplace and start cooking or brewing. The recipe will be available to view, and it will tell you exactly what is needed to create that cuisine. It will also tell you the effects you'll gain and for how long. Okay, that is the end of this guide all about crafting. If you have any questions, then please put them in the comments below and I'll be sure to respond. Now don't forget that this is a complete beginner's guide. I know that there are many more things to go into with crafting, but I'm saving that for later down the line. This is basics, from scratch. I hope it helped and I hope you enjoyed. If so, then leave a like and also subscribe, it helps me out a lot. Stay tuned for next episode where I'll be discussing weapon and armor choices and also set crafting. Bye for now.